Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The asterisk, the morning sun filtered through the crystal windows of the Blackwood estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors that Sophia Bennet had walked alone for 3 years. She moved through the grand hallways like a ghost, her silk robe whispering against her legs as she made her way to the breakfast room. The house was magnificent, with its towering ceilings and priceless artwork, but it felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. Sophia paused at the doorway of the dining room, watching her husband Damien Blackwood read his financial papers. He sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit already pressed and ready for another day of building his empire. He didn't look up when she entered. He never did.
Right.
"Good morning," she said softly, taking her usual seat at the opposite end of the table, his eyes never leaving the stock reports. Sophia poured herself coffee from the silver service, the clink of the cup against the saucer, the only sound in the vast room. She had learned not to expect conversation during breakfast, or lunch, or dinner for that matter. 3 years ago, Sophia had been a promising young architect fresh out of graduate school, full of dreams and ambition.
Oh.
Then her father's construction company had faced bankruptcy, and Damien Blackwood had appeared like a savior with a proposition. Marry him, and he would save her family's business. It was a cold transaction disguised as a romantic gesture, complete with a lavish wedding that made headlines in all the society pages. The wedding night had been the first sign of what their marriage would become. Damien had kissed her cheek, told her she looked beautiful, and then retreated to his own bedroom. He had never touched her since, never even tried. Sophia had spent countless nights wondering what was wrong with her. Why? Her own husband found her so undesirable. She had tried everything in those early months. She cooked his favorite meals, dressed in beautiful gowns, attempted to engage him in conversation about his business. Nothing worked. Damien remained polite but distant, treating her more like a house guest than a wife. Eventually, Sophia stopped trying and started building a life of her own within the walls of his mansion. After finishing her solitary breakfast, Sophia retreated to her private study, a sun-filled room that had become her sanctuary. The walls were lined with architectural books and her own sketches, dreams of buildings she would never get to design. She had continued her education in secret, earning additional certifications online and developing innovative, sustainable design concepts that she shared with no one. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. It was from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, accepting her proposal for a new wing design. Sophia's heart raced as she read the message. They wanted to meet with her next week to discuss the project. It would be her first major commission, something she had earned entirely on her own merit. She printed the email and held it in her trembling hands. This was her chance to step out of the shadows, to be more than just Mrs. Damien Blackwood. She was Sophia Bennet, and she was talented in her own right. The realization filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. That afternoon, while Damien was in his endless meetings, Sophia walked through the mansion's gardens. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance heavy in the summer air. She found herself thinking about the woman she used to be, the one who believed in love and partnership. That woman had died slowly over 3 years of neglect, but maybe it wasn't too late to resurrect her. The sound of Damien's car in the driveway interrupted her thoughts. She watched from the garden as he stepped out of his black Mercedes, his phone already pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he carried the weight of his empire like a burden. For just a moment, she felt a flicker of sympathy for him. Then she remembered the 3 years of silence, and the feeling disappeared. That evening, they sat at opposite ends of the dining table again, the space between them filled with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. Damien barely touched his food, his attention focused on the tablet beside his plate. Sophia watched him, really looked at him, for the first time in months, made her heart flutter. Now those eyes never met hers. "I received an interesting offer today," she said, breaking the silence. Damien looked up, surprise flickering across his face. It had been so long since she had initiated conversation that he seemed genuinely startled. "The Metropolitan Museum wants me to design their new contemporary wing," she continued, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "You're an architect?" he asked, and the question cut through her like a knife. 3 years of marriage, and he didn't even know what she did with her time. Yes, Damien, I'm an architect. I have been for the past 6 years. Her voice carried an edge of frustration she couldn't hide. He set down his fork, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I didn't know you were still practicing. You never asked? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Damien's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might actually engage in a real conversation. Instead, he picked up his tablet again. Congratulations, he said, without looking at her. I'm sure it will keep you busy. Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. It will, she said. Finally, I'll have something meaningful to do with my time. She left the dining room without another word, missing the way Damien's hands clenched around his tablet as he watched her go. The next few days, Sophia carried herself differently, with a confidence that hadn't been there before. She spent hours working on her museum proposal, her passion for her craft reigniting like a flame that had been smoldering for years. On Friday evening, Damien's assistant called to inform Sophia that they would be attending a charity gala the following night. It was the first social event he had included her in for over a year. Sophia agreed, though she couldn't understand why he suddenly wanted her presence. She spent Saturday afternoon choosing her dress, finally settling on a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and made her feel beautiful for the first time in months. When she descended the grand staircase that evening, she found Damien waiting by the door in his black tuxedo. He looked up as she approached, and she saw something flicker in his eyes before his usual mask of indifference slipped back into place.
Ah, you look lovely,
he said, offering her his arm. Thank you, she replied, accepting the gesture, but maintaining her emotional distance. The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel, a glittering affair filled with New York's elite. Sophia moved through the crowd at Damien's side, playing the role of the perfect wife she had been trained to be. She smiled and made polite conversation, waiting for champagne that someone finally saw her. Sophia Bennett. I can't believe it's really you. She turned to find Vincent Sterling, a prominent real estate developer she had known in college. He was tall and charming, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that reached them. Vincent, she said, genuine pleasure. Coloring her voice, it's Sophia Blackwood now. Of course I should have known. You married the king of real estate himself. His eyes sparkled with mischief. I have to say, you look absolutely stunning. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Sophia felt a blush creep up her neck. It had been so long since someone had looked at her with appreciation, with desire. Thank you. You're very kind. Kind nothing. I'm honest. Tell me, what have you been up to? Last I heard, you were designing the most innovative, eco-friendly buildings on the East Coast. For the next 20 minutes, Sophia found herself in the most engaging conversation she had had in years. Vincent listened to her ideas, asked thoughtful questions about her work, and treated her like the intelligent, accomplished woman she was. She felt herself coming alive under his attention, remembering what it was like to be valued for her mind and not just her appearance. Across the room, Damien watched his wife laugh at something Vincent Sterling said. She looked radiant, her eyes bright with excitement as she gestured enthusiastically about something. When had he last seen her look so alive? When had she last looked at him with such warmth and interest? A strange sensation twisted in his chest as Vincent leaned closer to Sophia, his hand briefly touching her arm as he spoke. Damien found himself moving through the crowd before he realized what he was doing. Sophia, he said as he approached, his voice carrying an edge he couldn't quite hide. She turned to him and he saw something in her expression that hadn't been there in years. Confidence, power, beauty, that had nothing to do with her physical appearance and everything to do with the woman she was becoming. Damien, you remember Vincent Sterling, don't you? She said smoothly. The two men shook hands, their grips just a little too firm, their smiles just a little too sharp. Damien could feel the attraction between Vincent and his wife like electricity in the air, and it awakened something primal and possessive in him that he hadn't known existed. Your wife was just telling me about her museum project, Vincent said. She's as brilliant as she is beautiful. You're a lucky man, Blackwood. Yes, Damien said, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. I am. For the first time in 3 years, Damian Blackwood truly looked at his wife, and what he saw made his blood burn with a desire he had spent years suppressing. The question was it already too late to claim what had always been his? The drive home from the gala passed in tense silence. Sophia stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, acutely aware of Damian's presence beside her in the back of the limousine. She could feel his eyes on her, studying her profile in the dim light. The attention should have thrilled her after 3 years of being ignored, but instead, it made her wary. What had changed? Why was he suddenly interested in her now? Vincent Sterling seemed quite taken with you, Damian said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia turned to face him, noting the tight set of his jaw. He's an old friend from college. We're discussing architecture. Architecture. The word came out flat, skeptical. Yes, Damian. Some men actually find my mind attractive. The barb hit its mark, and she saw his fingers tighten around his phone. They pulled up to the mansion, and Damian helped her out of the car with uncharacteristic gentleness. His hand lingered on hers longer than necessary, and Sophia felt an unwelcome flutter of awareness. She pulled away quickly, gathering her dress to walk up the front steps. Sophia, wait. She paused at the front door, her key halfway to the lock. What is it? Would you join me for a drink? In the study. Request was so unexpected that Sophia almost laughed. In 3 years of marriage, Damian had never invited her anywhere, least of all to his private sanctuary. Why? Because I'd like to talk to you. Something in his tone made her hesitate. There was a vulnerability there she had never heard before, a crack in his usual armor of indifference. Against her better judgment, she nodded. The study was masculine and imposing, all dark wood and leather furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden, and a fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Damian poured himself a scotch and offered her wine, which she accepted with trembling fingers. They sat in chairs facing each other, the coffee table between them like a barrier. Damian studied his drink for a long moment before speaking. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Sophia nearly choked on her wine. I'm sorry, what?
What?
3 years ago, I married you for the wrong reasons. I needed a wife who would look good at social functions and not interfere with my business. I thought that's what you wanted too. Security, status, a comfortable life. And what made you think I didn't want love, companionship, a real marriage? The words came out sharper than she intended, years of hurt bleeding through. Damian flinched. Because that's what your father told me. He said you were practical, that you understood it was a business arrangement. Sophia set down her wine glass with shaking hands. My father was desperate to save his company. He would have said anything you wanted to hear. I realize that now. Damian leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Tonight, watching you with Sterling, I saw who you really are. Not the quiet, compliant woman who sits at my dinner table, but the passionate, intelligent woman I married. And I realized what a fool I've been. Heat flickered in Sophia's chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. So now that another man shows interest in me, suddenly I'm worth your attention? No, his voice was rough, honest. Now that I've seen you truly happy for the first time in 3 years, I realize what I've stolen from both of us. Sophia stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The garden was bathed in moonlight, peaceful and beautiful. She had spent so many lonely evenings walking those paths, dreaming of a different life. Do you know what the worst part has been? She said without turning around. Not the loneliness, not even the rejection. It's been feeling invisible in my own home, feeling like I don't matter, like I'm just another piece of expensive furniture you acquired. She heard Damian rise from his chair, felt him approach until he was standing just behind her. The heat of his body warmed her back, and she caught his scent, expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. You're not invisible to me anymore, he said softly. I see you, Sophia. Now, I see how beautiful you are, how brilliant, how much I've wasted. Sophia closed her eyes, fighting against the pull of his words. It's too late, Damian, is it? His hand touched her shoulder, gentle but firm. Look at me. She turned slowly, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. This was not the cold, distant man she had lived with for 3 years. This was a man awakening to desire, to need, to something that looked dangerously like love. I want to start over, he said. I want to court you properly, to learn everything about you I should have known from the beginning. I want to earn the right to call you my wife. And what if I don't want to give you that chance? What if I've already decided to leave? The question hit him like a physical blow. Are you leaving? Sophia studied his face, seeing real fear there for the first time. Don't know. I've been so numb for so long, I'm not sure what I want anymore. Damien stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Then let me show you. Let me remind you what it feels like to be desired, to be cherished. His hand cupped her face with surprising tenderness, and Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. When his thumb traced her lower lip, she couldn't suppress the soft gasp that escaped her. I've wanted to touch you like this for longer than I care to admit, he confessed, but I convinced myself it was better to keep my distance, to keep things simple. I was wrong, Damien. His name was barely a whisper. Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll never touch you again. But Sophia couldn't say the words, because the truth was, she had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. She had imagined what it would feel like to have her husband look at her with desire, to want her as more than just a beautiful accessory. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss was everything she had hoped for, and more. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But when she responded, when her arms wound around his neck and her body pressed against his, the kiss deepened with desperate hunger. Sophia had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, to have strong arms around her and skilled lips moving against hers. Damien kissed her like a man starving, like he was trying to make up for 3 years of deprivation in a single moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Damien rested his forehead against hers, his hands tangled in her hair. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. It's not because you have to, but because you want to. Sophia looked into his eyes and saw the man she had fallen in love with during their brief courtship, before duty and obligation had built walls between them. She saw regret, desire, and something that might have been love. Yes, she breathed. Damien lifted her in his arms, carrying her through the mansion to his bedroom, a space she had never entered in 3 years of marriage. The room was elegant but warm, the massive bed that dominated the space and windows overlooking the city. He set her down gently beside the bed, his hands trembling slightly as they found the zipper of her dress. Are you sure? He asked one more time. Instead of answering, Sophia reached up and loosened his tie, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. She wanted to see all of him, to finally claim her husband the way she should have 3 years ago, when their clothes fell away. They came together with a passion that shook them both. Damien worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, telling her how beautiful she was, how sorry he was for wasting so much time. Sophia gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back as they moved together in perfect rhythm. Afterward, they lay entwined in the darkness, skin touching skin. Damien traced patterns on Sophia's bare shoulder, marveling at how right she felt in his arms. I love you, he said suddenly, the words surprising them both. I think I've loved you since our wedding day, but I was too afraid to admit it. Sophia lifted her head to look at him. Afraid of what? Of needing you, of being vulnerable. My father always said that love was a weakness, that it would destroy everything I'd worked for. And now? Damien smiled, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. Now I think he was wrong about everything that mattered. The morning sun streamed through the bedroom windows, waking Sophia slowly. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She was in Damien's bed, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her. It felt like a dream, but the steady beat of his heart under her ear confirmed it was real. Damien stirred beneath her, his hand tightening around her waist. Good morning, beautiful, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Sophia lifted her head to look at him, taking in his tousled hair and the stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked younger like this, less guarded. Good morning, they stayed like that for a while, simply holding each other and talking softly about nothing important. It was the most intimate they had ever been, not just physically, but emotionally. For the first time, Sophia felt like she was seeing the real Damien, the man behind the corporate facade. But as the morning progressed, reality began to intrude. Damien's phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls, reminding them both of the world outside their bedroom sanctuary. "I have to go," he said reluctantly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Board meeting at 9. But tonight, let's have dinner. Together. Really together this time." Sophia nodded, watching as he dressed in his usual expensive suit. When he was ready to leave, he paused at the bedroom door. "Sophia, what happened between us? It wasn't just about last night. It meant everything," I said. After he left, Sophia remained in his bed for a long time, trying to process everything that had changed between them. The physical intimacy had been incredible, but it was the emotional connection that left her reeling. For the first time in 3 years, she felt hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope could lead to disappointment, and Sophia wasn't sure her heart could survive being broken again. She spent the day working on her museum project, throwing herself into the designs with renewed passion. The work grounded her, reminded her that she was more than just Damien's wife. She was a talented architect, with her own dreams and ambitions. That afternoon, Vincent Sterling called. "Sophia, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from the museum committee. I have a proposition for you." "Oh, what kind of proposition?" "I'm developing a new, eco-friendly residential complex downtown. After hearing about your work last night, I'd love to have you lead the architectural team. It would be a full partnership, not just a consulting role." Sophia's breath caught. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been dreaming of. A chance to create something meaningful, to build a career on her own merits. "That sounds incredible, Vincent, but I should probably discuss it with my husband first. Of course, though I have to say, any man who would stand in the way of your talent doesn't deserve you." The comment stayed with Sophia long after she hung up. Would Damien support her career ambitions, or would he expect her to remain the decorative wife? Now that he was finally paying attention to her? When Damien arrived home that evening, he found Sophia in the garden, sketching in the fading light. She looked up as he approached, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Rough day?" she asked. "The worst. The Japanese deal fell through. The environmental group is protesting our Seattle project. And my CFO thinks we're expanding too fast." He sat beside her on the stone bench, loosening his tie. "How was your day?" "I got an interesting job offer," Damien's expression sharpened. "From whom?" "Vincent Sterling. He wants me to lead the architectural team for his new residential project." Silence stretched between them, and Sophia felt her heart sink. She could see the calculation in Damien's eyes, the way he was weighing her opportunity against his own interests. "It's a good offer," she continued when he didn't respond. "Full creative control, substantial compensation, and the chance to implement some revolutionary sustainable design concepts. And it would mean working closely with Sterling." There it was, the jealousy, the possessiveness. Sophia set down her sketchbook and faced him fully. "Are you going to forbid me from taking it?" "I'm not going to forbid you from anything. But I'd be lying if I said I was comfortable with you working with a man who clearly wants more than a professional relationship with you." "So what are you saying?" Damien ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "I'm saying that after one night together, I apparently turn into a caveman when it comes to you. I'm saying that the thought of you spending every day with a man who looks at you the way Sterling does makes me want to punch something." Despite herself, Sophia felt a flutter of feminine satisfaction at his admission. "And what if I take the job anyway? Then I'll deal with it. Because I love you and I want you to be happy, even if it kills me." The simple honesty of his response melted the last of Sophia's resistance. This was what she had been waiting for, not just desire, but respect for her autonomy and dreams. "What if I told you I had a better idea?" she said softly. "I'm listening." "What if instead of me working for Vincent, we worked together? Blackwood Enterprises has been looking to expand into sustainable development. I could head that division. Bring my expertise to your company." Damien's eyes lit up. "You'd want to do that? Work with me? I'd want to work with my husband?" "Yes. As an equal partner, not just a wife who happens to have architectural skills. Equal partners in everything." He agreed, pulling her into his arms. Business and pleasure. When he kissed her this time, it was different from the desperate passion of the night before. This kiss spoke of commitment, of a future they would build together. That night, they made love with a tenderness that brought tears to Sophia's eyes. Damien took his time with her, worshipping every inch of her body as if he was trying to make up for 3 years of neglect. When she cried out his name in pleasure, he held her close and whispered words of love against her skin in the quiet. Aftermath. As they lay tangled in the sheets, Sophia finally felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "I have a confession," Damien said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. "What's that?" "I used to watch you? In the garden, in your study, when you thought you were alone? I told myself it was just to make sure you were safe, but the truth is, I was fascinated by you. The way you moved, the way you concentrated when you were working. I wanted to go to you so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of wanting you too much, of losing control, of falling in love with my own wife." Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "And now I realize that loving you doesn't make me weak. It makes me stronger. It makes me want to be the man you deserve." Over the following weeks, their relationship transformed completely. They worked together during the day, planning the new Sustainable Development Division that would revolutionize Blackwood Enterprises. Sophia's innovative designs and Damien's business acumen proved to be a powerful combination. At night, they couldn't get enough of each other. They made love with a passion that left them both breathless, talking afterward about their dreams and fears. Damien learned about Sophia's childhood, her love of art and architecture, her desire to create buildings that would make the world better. Sophia discovered that beneath his corporate exterior, Damien was a man who cared deeply about legacy and making a positive impact. The night Sophia officially joined Blackwood Enterprises as Vice President of Sustainable Development. They celebrated with champagne and caviar in bed. "Two new beginnings," Damien toasted, clinking his glass against hers. "Two second chances," Sophia replied. "Two forever," they said together. 6 months later, Sophia stood before a room full of investors, presenting the plans for their revolutionary, eco-friendly residential complex. Damien watched from the back of the room, his face glowing with pride as she fielded questions with expertise and grace. This was his wife, brilliant, passionate, unstoppable. And she was finally completely his, just as he was hers. After the presentation, as they walked home through Central Park hand in hand, Sophia stopped suddenly. "What is it?" Damien asked. "I'm happy," she said, wonder in her voice. "For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy." Damien pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the city lights sparkled around them. "So am I, so am I." They had started as strangers bound by a contract, lived as roommates for 3 years, and finally found their way to love. It hadn't been the fairy tale romance Sophia had once dreamed of, but it was real, hard-won, and absolutely perfect. 2 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the gardens of the Blackwood estate as Sophia watched from the terrace, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly.
At
6 months pregnant, she glowed with a happiness that seemed to radiate from within. The mansion that had once felt like a prison now buzzed with life and love. "Mrs. Blackwood, the final blueprints for the Singapore project have arrived," her assistant informed her, setting down a leather portfolio on the outdoor table. Sophia smiled at the title. She had kept her maiden name professionally, but hearing Mrs. Blackwood no longer felt like wearing someone else's identity. She had made the name her own, just as she had made this life her own. "Thank you, Jennifer. Please schedule a video conference with the development team for tomorrow morning." As her assistant left, Damien appeared on the terrace, loosening his tie after another long day at the office. But unlike the old days, his face lit up the moment he saw her, immediately his hand settling on her waist as he pressed a tender kiss to her lips. "How are my two favorite people today?" he murmured against her mouth, one hand moving to caress her belly. "Your daughter has been doing gymnastics all afternoon," Sophia laughed, covering his hand with hers. "I think she's going to be as restless as her father. Or as brilliant as her mother," Damien countered. Settling into the chair beside her and pulling her feet into his lap to massage them, it was a nightly ritual now, these small acts of care and devotion that spoke louder than any grand gesture. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of growth, both personal and professional. Blackwood Sustainable Development had become one of the most sought-after firms in the world. With Sophia's innovative designs gracing skylines from New York to Tokyo, more importantly, their marriage had transformed from a cold contract into a partnership built on mutual respect, passionate love, and unwavering support. "I have news," Damien said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Good news, I hope? The Tokyo project won the International Architecture Award for Sustainable Innovation. Your design, your vision, your genius. Sophia's eyes filled with tears of joy. It was the highest honor in her field, recognition she had dreamed of since her first day in architecture school. Our vision, she corrected softly. None of this would have been possible without you believing in me. Damien lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a reverent kiss to her palm. I should have believed in you from the beginning, should have seen. What everyone else could see so clearly, Sophia said firmly, though her voice was gentle. We promised we wouldn't live in the past anymore. What matters is now, and the future we're building together. As if summoned by her words, their housekeeper appeared with a young girl of about 8, the daughter of one of their employees who often played in the gardens after school, Mama Sophia. Little Emma called out, running to embrace her. All the staff's children had taken to calling Sophia Mama, a title that filled her heart with warmth. Hello, sweetheart, Sophia said, wrapping the child in a hug. How was school today? I drew a picture of the baby's room, Emma announced proudly, pulling out a colorful drawing. With clouds on the ceiling and flowers on the walls, just like you described. Damien and Sophia exchanged a look over the child's head, both thinking the same thing. This house, once so cold and empty, was now filled with the laughter and love of an extended family. Their employees weren't just staff anymore. They were people whose lives had become intertwined with their own. That night, after Emma had been collected by her mother and the house had settled into its evening quiet, Sophia and Damien sat in their bedroom, going over the final details for the nursery. The room that had once been Sophia's lonely study was being transformed into a sanctuary for their daughter. Have you thought any more about names? Damien asked, his hand tracing patterns on her bare shoulder as she leaned against him. Keep coming back to hope, Sophia admitted. After everything we've been through, she feels like our proof that beautiful things can grow from difficult beginnings. Hope Blackwood. Damien tested the name, then smiled. It's perfect. She's perfect. Just like her mother. And stubborn like her father, Sophia added with a laugh, feeling their daughter kick in response to Damien's voice. As they prepared for bed, Sophia caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the lonely, invisible wife she had once been. This woman glowed with confidence, love, and purpose. She was a successful architect, a beloved wife, and soon to be a mother. She was everything she had ever dreamed of becoming. What are you thinking about? Damien asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind and meeting her eyes in the mirror. Just remembering the woman I used to be, one who felt so small and invisible in this house? That woman was never small, Damien said firmly. She was just waiting for someone worthy enough to see her light. I'm sorry it took me so long to be that person. Sophia turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. You were worth the wait. When they made love that night, it was with the tender passion of two people who had learned to treasure what they had nearly lost. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow, every whispered endearment, a celebration of the love that had grown from the ashes of loneliness into something unbreakable. 6 months later, Hope Blackwood arrived on a snowy December morning, perfect and healthy, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's delicate features. As Damien held his daughter for the first time, tears streaming down his face, Sophia watched the final piece of their family fall into place. She's so beautiful, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Thank you for becoming the man I always believed you could be, Sophia replied, reaching out to touch their daughter's tiny hand. The christening took place in the spring, in the gardens of the estate where Sophia had once walked alone. Now, those same paths were filled with friends, family, and colleagues who had become like family. Vincent Sterling was there, having become not a threat, but a dear friend and business partner. Sophia's parents had reconciled with both her and Damien, finally understanding that their daughter's happiness was worth more than any business deal. As the evening celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Sophia found herself in the conservatory where she had spent so many lonely hours. But she wasn't alone now. Damien sat beside her, Hope sleeping peacefully in his arms, and their future stretched out before them bright with possibility. Do you ever regret it? Damien asked softly. The years we lost, The pain we caused each other? Sophia considered the question carefully. I regret the pain, yes. But I don't regret the journey. Everything we went through made us who we are today. It taught us not to take love for granted, to fight for what matters, to choose each other every single day. I choose you, Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. Today, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of our lives. My husband, my partner, my love. As they sat together in the soft light of the conservatory. Watching their daughter sleep and planning their future, Sophia marveled at how far they had come. From strangers bound by contract, to soulmates bound by love, from a house filled with silence, to a home filled with laughter. From loneliness, to a love so deep, it took her breath away. The invisible wife had become visible, not because someone finally noticed her, but because she had refused to remain hidden, and the man who had been too afraid to love had learned that the greatest strength came not from control, but from surrender to the heart. Their story wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect beginning. It was something better, a real love story that proved that sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most difficult beginnings. And as they walked upstairs to their bedroom, their daughter safe in Damien's arms and their hands clasped, together, they knew that this was just the beginning of their forever.